Roll up. Dwan B. Music for your soul. Roll up and listen to Incense and Ashtrays with Dwan B. Music for your soul.
that flow. That's why my music is so damn good on this show. You don't see me do no plastic beats that somebody just ripped off of some random site from someone putting music together in their mama's basement. Nah. I pay for my tracks from real musicians. Shouts out to Duncan Pendergrass for that intro right there. We here. Incense and ashtrays. Thank y'all for listening. We about to talk about the decline, the slow decline of R&B music and how R&B was taken from us culturally. Let's get it in.
You're listening to Incense and Ashtrays with DwannB. Music for your soul.
Yeah, let's get it started. What's up to everybody in the chat room? How y'all doing? Make sure y'all having a good time. I got my soul music tree, family tree, that's almost ready to be debuted. This year, 2022, we going hard into the music side of the game. We going hard on that music side of the game this year. Because we've had people in groups trying to steal our heritage. We got to defend against that. And it's not casting aspersions on all groups, but you know, there are some certain groups that have been tripping, trying to claim our music. So I'm taking this year, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about music on this show as I write my book. And as I get the Incense and Ashtrays website ready for y'all so you can break all this stuff down. This is my music family tree that I will be giving out to you guys pretty soon when it's all the way done. You see I have a legend down here talking about covering everything. Black American Music Family Tree from 1619 to 2022. The subgenres, major subgenres. Yeah. The primary genres, blues and jazz. How we begat from the Delta blues, you get rock and roll. You get country western. Hell, you even get yodeling. You ever seen a black music family tree that includes yodeling and bluegrass? I'm sure you haven't until now. We're going to be talking about the importance of bebop and how the culture of bebop developed into the culture of hip hop, funk, soul, and disco. How disco is the base form for Afrobeat, dancehall, crossover pop, EDM. How funk is the base format of all hip hop and heavy metal. People don't know heavy metal is a combination of rock and roll and funk. We're going to be talking about how these branches of the trees don't all, just because a person's on this side of the branch, don't mean their music isn't influenced by that side of the branch. For instance, you'll take an act that's out right now, Kamasi Washington, one of the greatest jazz artists, or Terrace Martin. They got their start touring with Snoop Dogg in hip hop. When you look at someone like a Kamasi Washington, his sound is over here on the jazz fusion side of the game, but he also wrote classics with Kendrick Lamar over here on the funk rap fusion side of the game. You look at a cat like Flying Lotus, who's dominating the EDM side of the game, but he also has hits with people like Kendrick Lamar and Nipsey over here on the G-Funk side of the game. We're going to be talking about all this. We're going to really piss a lot of Jamaicans off. Well, not the Jamaicans who are on cold. Not you brothers and sisters, but the Busta Rhymes style Jamaicans. When I show to them how soul evolved in the sky into rocksteady, into reggae, all from soul music, and dancehall wasn't a direct reflection of reggae. It was more of Jamaica's interpretation of American crossover pop, which is rooted in disco, which is rooted in R&B. This series, we gonna be talking about all this shit. We about to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. Because when it comes to, they try to limit our music as FBAs. They try to put us over here into this one little branch of music over here in hip hop, when we're the creators of it all. And the greatest amongst us do it all. Trance, Brit pop, world beat, Eurobeat, Latin pop. That all comes from the rock and roll R&B nucleus, which is born out of the blues and jazz. See, when you hear these people from the Caribbean trying to claim hip hop, they can only take you back to the 70s. I'm taking your ass back to the 1600s. And I'm gonna dare any of them motherfuckers to try it. Anybody that got a debate with me can call up. Show up, run up. Run up, get done up. That's what we doing over here at Incense and Ashtrays. Run up, get done up. But before I get to the tree, we're going to first start this off. This is a series that I'm starting right now called The Decline of R&B. The reason why I'm calling it, I'm first starting out with The Decline of R&B, is because the reason why you get people like, the reason why someone like a Drake can have so many hit records back to back to back to back to back, the reason why someone who can't sing like a Rihanna can sell so many records is because the pace and the feel of the music had to be dumbed down. It had to be dumbed down to a level to where the masses would accept basically anything the record labels would throw out. The reason why, and I don't have any issues with them, but let's just tell the truth. Music like Usher, Chris Brown, these are cats who musically could not have survived in the 1970s. Performative-wise, yes, they could have. Dancing, yes, all that's true. But their style of music, there's no way it could have existed in the 70s and 80s. There was just too much competition. There was just too much music out there. They had to slow down the quality of our music to create the environment for today's plastic trash that's on the radio. And I don't know if you guys saw that article that came out recently. It said Spotify said that the majority of its streams now is in older music. People aren't even listening to today's music as much as they used to because there's nothing there. But that wasn't our fault. That didn't happen by happenstance. That happened because in 1972, Columbia did a study on black music in an attempt to co-opt black music. And once they figured out black music, they found ways to first amalgamate the music and then bury it. Sort of the same thing they do with people, with groups of people in their history. Join the group, become part of the group, and then kill off what the group was doing and put their face on it. The reason why hip-hop, rap music, is the #1 genre of music across the world today can be credited to the record industry purposely killing off R&B. We as black people, even during the greatest era of hip-hop in the early 90s, we've always mixed our R&B with our rap. You know, you listen to Digital Underground, X-Clan, Ice Cube, KRS-One, whatever your taste was. But if you remember back in the 80s and the 90s, you'd turn that off and turn on some Anita Baker. I remember growing up in LA, the Gangsters. Soon as the Gangsters is done playing NWA, nigga, Shirley Murdoch was next. It's morning. Man, when that song came out, man, you heard every nigga that had a sound system in the hood was bumping that in they trunk. It's morning. Doom. That heavy bass line. We've always sort of weaved back and forth between the genres. We stopped weaving back and forth between the genres in the early 2000s when R&B had gotten so stale, so bad, it really wasn't nothing for us to go back to. A lot of people. Now, me personally, we had the people who helped R&B survive, and I'm going to get into them as I build and talk more. You know, you had your Maxwell's, Erykah Badu's, Jill Scott's, Music Soul Child. That era, what we call the neo soul era, is what preserved the soul sound. And we have artists that are out today who are still soulful, who just don't get the radio play. Anderson .Paak, Corey Henry, Anthony Hamilton just released a new album a few months ago that was dope. Kim, Terrace Martin, Robert Glasper. So soul definitely still exists. It's still there. It's just not what the industry pushes. The industry only pushes ratchetness and debauchery. So sit back, kick back, as we go on this journey to break down how rhythm and blues devolved into rhythm and bullshit.
You're listening to Incense and Ashtrays with Dwan B. Music for your soul.
The story begins in 1972. In 1972, a couple master's students at the Harvard Business School prepared a study commissioned by one of Columbia Records' executives, detailing how the Columbia Record Group, I'm sorry, not Columbia University, the Columbia, the music, the label. I said university, god damn it. Harvard Business School. I'm dyslexic. When I talk, just be patient with me. Sometimes I flip things. The Harvard Business School commissioned a study, prepared a study for Columbia Records on how to better integrate the largely independent black music industry. See, people always talk about what black people need to do. We just need to do this. We just need to do that. Study your history, nigga. Half the shit, 99% of the shit y'all saying we need to do, we've done. Then a trick bag gets thrown in the mix. And instead of us as a people studying the trick bag that got thrown in the mix, we'll look back and be like, man, I don't know why Berry Gordy sold Motown. Man, he's stupid. And you don't pay attention to the chess plays that went on that led to these black executives having to sell off their sound. This is basically what happened. When you go back to the late 60s through the 70s, you had a lot of black independent owned record labels. It wasn't just Motown. You had Motown in Detroit. You had VJ Records in Chicago. Mind you, VJ Records, black-owned record company, that was the first record label to release the Beatles. And VJ Records ended up going out of business because after they released the Beatles, goddamn, was it Columbia? I think it was Columbia. No, not Columbia. What's the other one over there? The one over on, y'all know that record company over on Vine and Sunset. God damn it. I'm dyslexic. I'm doing this shit off the top of my head. What's the name of that company over there? Capitol Records. Capitol Records sued the high heavens out of VJ Records once they saw them hit those successful albums with the Beatles and got the Beatles back. But I digress. And I'm not naming all the music labels, it's just some of them. So I don't want nobody coming in the show afterwards saying, man, you missed such and such. Okay. If I missed something, just put it in the comments. Chill, nigga, chill. But you had Motown Records, you had VJ Records, you had Stax Records down in Memphis, and you had Philadelphia International. The major three black labels, there were other ones, again, like I said, there were other ones, but the major three, when we're dealing with the 60s and the 70s, was Motown, Stax, and PHI. PHI stands for Philadelphia International. The reason the quality of music when you go back to the 70s and the 60s was so grand was because you had black people, artists, making the decisions. At Motown, you had Berry Gordy, who was a songwriter himself. Berry Gordy got his money right and together to create Motown off of songs that he wrote for Jackie Wilson. I want a lover. I want to love a woman, a lover, a friend. Go back and listen to some of that old Jackie Wilson. Work out, work out, work out. I can't sing, goddammit, but I feel it. Berry Gordy got the money to create a Motown from, one, his family savings. His parents did pretty well financially in Detroit, his family, and his mom had a bank, had a loan business. Well, not really business, but a loan, money ready to lend out to the family whenever the family needs something. The family sort of pulled money in together and they gave out loans. So Berry Gordy got his money for Motown basically from his hits with Jackie Wilson, the money he got from his mom, and the drug game. Don't ever let them talk shit about the drug or the hustle game, the money's runners. Banks wouldn't give black people loans and give black people money. So a lot of your black music had a lot of ties to unscrupulous street activities. No different in the 80s. Anita Baker got her start from Freeway Rick Ross funding her demo. Yes, all that beautiful music you heard from Anita Baker got its start from the street game. The street game and the music industry have always been synonymous. It's true in the blues, it's true in jazz, true in rock and roll, true in R&B, true in hip hop. Don't ever let these people make you think that hip hop is doing something new, being integrated with the streets. Black music has always been integrated with the streets. You had that act. You also had James Brown, who was independent. James Brown had his own label, his own pressing plant, and his own means of distribution. Stax Records, although owned by white boys, was controlled by the black musicians. The white boys sort of stayed out the way. And when you're dealing with Stax Records, you're talking about Isaac Hayes. People don't know that was Isaac Hayes behind a lot of that music. Isaac Hayes, Hot Bothered Soul, and David Porter. Hayes and Porter. Booker T and the MGs were the house band that played behind a lot of those hits down there at Stax Records. And then you have Philadelphia International, which was basically Thom Bell and another brain fart of mine, Gamblin' Huff. Thom Bell and Gamblin' Huff. And what was going on with the music, since you had musicians and artists making the choices in how the music was put together, you had more of a grand sound, a robust sound. You had live, the music back then was composed of not only a singer, you had arrangers who wrote arrangements. And what we mean by arrangements is this. This is a part of music that you don't even see credited on albums anymore. A song may have one arranger. It may have three different arrangers. One person may have just arranged the horn parts. And when I say arrangement, I mean the people who actually used a pencil and a paper and a music sheet, and they wrote down note for note the parts that each musician played and the singers sang. So you'd have David Porter and Isaac Hayes down there at Stax Records writing the strings, the horns. They always call Stax the Motown of the South. Here's the difference between Stax and Motown. Motown was up north in Detroit, had a more polished feel to it. Stax had that gritty soul. Isaac Hayes even had an album he had in 1969 called Hot Buttered Soul. And you had these full teams that put together a song. I was talking to my father-in-law, Mr. Carmichael, just last week about how music was put together at Motown and the competition. And he talked about how Motown had different teams. And he personally was on the team with Hal Davis and Berry Gordy himself. And then you had other teams that Norman Whitfield had his team. Holland Dozier Holland had their team. Leon Ware had his team. And they go into the studio and they create these arrangements for the artists. And the best arrangement, the best version of that song is what got put out on the radio. So an arranger, going back to an arrangement, the arranger is someone who works for the producer. Sometimes the producers also arrange. And how they did it was they may have Gene Page write the violin and the string arrangements, and they may have Tom Washington write the horn arrangements, and then you'll have someone else write the arrangements of the bass, or sometimes it may just be a flat out jam session, and then once they find a pocket between the drummer and the bass, they'll write arrangements around that. That's how music was put together back then. And then your producers were the ones who made the decisions on which arrangements were going to be used in a song. That's why sometimes if you go back on Spotify or Apple Music, you'll hear different songs, the same song arranged differently. Sometimes it'll be knocked down, flat out fist fights over which arrangement would be used and released to the public on the song. The record label may want to use an arrangement over here with this violin part and no horns, and the producer may want to use the arrangement that had the horns with the violin parts and maybe at a different tempo. So these were all things that went into the music. It was a truly team effort that was wrote, created, produced, and distributed by artists. Even the people who were wearing the suits, who were no longer the actual playing musicians, the people that made the decisions were the actual artists. So since the artists made the decisions, you got the results that you got. There was a lot of competition. You had to be great back then because there was no staying on top. On top wasn't a given position. There was so much music being created by so many legends. The music was everywhere. That's when we owned and controlled the process. That's when we decided what got released and what didn't. In 1972, the record industry saw all of this going on with black music, and they wanted a way to get a piece of it. So in the Harvard study, they talked about the key components of black music. Talked about how, the necessary components of black music were the drums, because the drums create a feeling, a thump in the heartbeat that culturally we as a people respond to. They saw that in the study, in their research. They understood in that research how the violins and the strings. That's why what happens when you fall in love with someone? What's the common cliche? That person pulled my heart strings. That's because strings and orchestration vibrate with the heart. They heal your heart. Necessary components to our music. Something that we as a people intrinsically understood. So what happened was, when the study was concluded, they decided in the moment not to tamper with black music. Let it go. Let it be. But as the 70s progressed, you started seeing the majors start buying the minors. You started seeing Columbia Records, Capitol Records, all of these companies start buying up catalogs to your soul artists and soul music. So by the time you get to the mid-70s, disco is starting to take over. And disco was a sound that the majors felt that they could co-opt. They couldn't co-opt funk. They couldn't really co-opt soul. But when we created disco, that was a form of music they can co-opt. So the majors started buying up a lot of labels as the 70s progressed, taking that independent mind frame and the autonomy black people had with our music and putting that autonomy in the control of white executives. Insert Clive Davis. Clive Davis was one of them, one of the main record executives that played a major part in this acquisition of our music. Disco oftentimes gets misrepresented as a form of white music, and it's not. Disco is black. The first disco song credited was Love's Theme by Barry White and the Love Unlimited Orchestra. Go back and listen to Love's Theme. It's just a straight, no words, just a straight orchestra of beauty. And when I do my next broadcast of Incense and Ashtrays, we're going to be playing this stuff musically. Here on YouTube, I can't play the music. But on Mixcloud, I can. Over on Mixcloud, you'll be able to hear what I'm talking about. Right now, I just got to explain it to you. You got to follow along with me. But for those of you who have your pen and your pad out, if you want to understand where disco comes from, it starts with Love's Theme by Barry White. That style is what evolved into disco. And as the late 70s came, these record industries that had started buying up independent black labels all throughout the country now started to insert their authority over black music. So you see, when they saw what James Brown was doing, they cut him out, and they ended James Brown's independent and bought him out and took his shit in the early 70s. And when he got back under the direction of a major label in 1975, after 1974, you saw James Brown music get sped up because the label, they weren't going to release anything that didn't sound like disco. Same happened with Curtis Mayfield and a lot of your soul artists from the late 60s. A lot of them didn't make it into the late 70s because the record industry was now requiring everyone to release disco songs. And a lot of your soul artists, they just weren't into that. So the decisions by white-owned record labels to alter the course of black artists who had shown nothing but success leading up to that is what started the decline of soul music and R&B. So by the time we get into the 80s, if you look back and listen, you hear a stark difference between music recorded in 1979 and music recorded in 1983. In that 4-year period, you saw a complete change of direction in music and the components of music, how music was put together. By the time you get to the 80s, there's less orchestration in the music. A lot less orchestration. You start seeing these white-owned record labels that are now producing black music. They took the drums out. Started playing with more of that electric drum feel, or they were bringing these electric drum sets, but you started to see more programmed drums. In the early 80s, you still have a live drummer playing on top of the program because they couldn't just take it right away. The people would have known and felt something was up and they wouldn't have bought it. Remember this. White supremacy always sees things 30 years down the line. Whatever changes they plan on making, they know those changes won't be made next year. Hell, maybe not even next decade. They implement these changes slowly. So you saw the live drums get taken out of the music. And mind you, the drums are the heartbeat of any song. When you take the live drummer out of the music, you take the human element, the human heart, out of the groove, and you replace it with a computer. Yes, I understand there are well-meaning people who program these computers into the drums, but that alone takes the soul from the music. Then they took the orchestration. At this time, you still hear orchestration in Motown because Motown had not yet succumbed to the music industry. You sort of see Motown have a resurgence in the early 80s between Rick James and Lionel Richie. But the other music that was on the majors, you hear Barry White's music go from these lush, orchestrated symphonies, because the Barry White song is a symphony. I don't give a damn what you say. You listen to that prime Barry White during the 70s, that was symphonic music. Matter of fact, it's better than the symphony what Barry White was pumping out. But by the time you get to the early 80s, you hear the symphonic sound being replaced by keyboard and computer orchestration. What you did get in the 80s was fortunately, you got a lot of great power singing. For those of you who are subscribers to my Incense and Ashtray show, you guys know that about 2 months ago, I did an episode on power singing of the 80s. You had your power singers, Vesta, Peabo Bryson, Luther Vandross, Freddie Jackson, Stephanie Mills, Whitney Houston, and the list goes on and on and on. The 80s had no shortage of power singers. But the music behind them started to become more programmed, more predictable. I remember one time talking to my father-in-law about the white paper report. This is how I know it's real. I've never read the full report. I've been scavenging like a motherfucker these last couple months. And if I don't find it the next time I go to a library, I am going to file a Freedom of Information Act request to get this motherfucker, the full report. I remember he told me a story. He said back in the early 80s when he was in the studio with Lionel Richie recording, I think it was during the time they were recording All Night Long, that era, early 80s. He said Dick Gregory came down to Motown with these stacks of papers, and Dick Gregory started passing out to everybody all of these papers. And Dick Gregory's point of view was, if I'm the only one that has this information, they gonna kill me. So I'm gonna pass it out to everybody. So Dick Gregory made copies of this report and passed it out to everyone. And in the report, it talked about the need to take live music from the black sound in order for them to properly co-opt our sound. I asked him, I said, what'd you ever do with that paper? I want to see it. He said, shit, I was scared. He said, shit, if Dick Gregory was scared, shit, I was scared too. He threw that shit in the trash. He didn't know. But he did say this one thing that was interesting to me. He said he heard from other producers that he knew. He wouldn't mention any names, but they were told by their record label if they stopped if they did not stop using live drums and live orchestration, they never record in the industry again. So a lot of your top producers that made those lush, beautiful arrangements of the 70s were no longer allowed to make those arrangements in the 80s. Leon, I'm not gonna say these, but the arrangers and producers that we as black people, that everyone out there listening, you must know, write these names down when it comes to the people responsible for our orchestration. This isn't all the names, but these are important names. Paul Reiser. He's the person that wrote those violin sections with Luther Vandross and a lot of other great artists. A lot of those Philadelphia International arrangements. Gene Page. He was the person that wrote a lot of arrangements for Barry White. Barry White would hum out what he wanted, and Gene Page would be the one that would write the stuff down. Leon Ware. James Anthony Carmichael. These are names you must know if you really want to understand the people responsible for the lush arrangements of our music. Norman Whitfield. Charles Stepney. Tom Washington. Maurice White. These are the people behind the sounds that still get reproduced and played today. George Clinton. Hold on one second. Let me play this real quick. Give me a break. I got an important call I gotta take. Pops called me twice in a row. Whenever Pops called back to back, I gotta hit up. I gotta find out what it is. You dig what I'm saying? I love my dad. My Pops, that was just my dad checking in on me, letting me know that we got some family in town from Texas. I'm like, all right, Pops, let me holler at you when I'm done with this radio broadcast. Shouts out to my dad. Back to what we were talking about. Simo, if you mean by my Uber Eats has arrived, yes. My Uber Eats has arrived between your mama's thighs. That's my Uber Eats. I Uber to Eats between your mama's thighs. You dig what I'm saying, Simo? Back to what we talking about. Star said, yeah, you better answer. Z Vision said, you heard somebody say R&B died when Chris Brown joined the Bloods. Ha! That's funny. That's funny. What's up, Tasha, in the chat room? I ain't looked at the chat because y'all be having me dying laughing in the chat room. So whenever I have a stream of thought, I don't look at you niggas in the chat room, all right? Because y'all be fucking me up. Y'all be fucking me up in the chat room. So I can't look at you bastards. Like, I love y'all, but y'all funny as hell. So I can't. I had a chat room, you know, on the side over there, and I'm not looking at it because y'all funny. It was funny too. I was just on the phone with Tasha last week, talking about a particular artist. I don't want to mention her name because I don't know if it's cool that I mention that artist's name. But me and Tasha was talking about her, and I was just talking to my father-in-law about that same artist. He was wondering, like, whatever happened to her? And I found out what happened through Tasha. Like, damn. She was great, but I'm not going to mention any names because I don't mention names unless I get permission to mention names. If I don't get permission to mention names, I don't talk about names. This nigga said the decline of R&B came when Chris Brown joined the Bloods. Wow. All right, where was I at, chat room? Where was I at? I lost my damn train of thought. Where was I at before my father called me to check in on me? Where was I at? Help me out, chat room. But I think I was in the 80s. That's where I was. It's all love, C-Mo. It's all love. Oh, Tom Washington. I did bring up Tom Washington. Arrangements and orchestration, yeah. See, yeah, Barry. I mean, how did I forget Quincy Jones? We can't forget Quincy Jones now. We can't forget Quincy Jones as far as the orchestration and arrangements. Oh, I was talking about the papers that Dick Gregory they do away. Yes. Yeah, he said he threw it away, but he said he was talking to another producer, a friend of his, and he never gave me the name of that producer, nor would I tell you if I knew, because you know, some of these people are still alive and they may not want their names to be put up in something like this. But he did say that he did hear from other producers on other labels that they were told, if you stay with this live orchestration, if you stay with these drums, this would be the last album you ever record. So behind the scenes, your great producers and arrangers were not allowed to do what they do. And before somebody comes running in here talking about, man, they should have did it anyway. Well, go to your crusty job tomorrow at McDonald's and go to work at your McDonald's job and see if they allow you to make a Big Mac the way you want it to be made. If you work at a job, if you work at McDonald's, you better make that goddamn sandwich the way the company tell you to make that sandwich, or you ain't gonna have no sandwich making job. Well, it's no different than the music industry. If the label tells you what to do and how to put the song together, either you're going to do it the way they tell you to do it, or you're not going to have a song. So they started to take away a lot of their music orchestration and live musicianship in the 80s, but they kept the great singers around. It happened right up under our nose because although there was a drop in quality in the production, the level of singer was every bit as good in the 80s as they were in the 70s. And when it comes to power singing, I'd probably say maybe a little bit better when you get to the 80s. But the same thing happened in the late 80s that happened in the late 70s. More acquisitions started to be made. And your power singers of the time stopped getting their contracts renewed. They separate your best singers from your best producers. And it further eroded the quality of R&B in the 90s. See how R&B music, let's get this straight. R&B music is the most expensive form of music to create and produce. When you go back and look at, I'm gonna give you an example of a song that my father-in-law did, All Night Long, with Lionel Richie. One day when I was talking to him about that song and putting it together, I asked him about that song about a few months ago. He said that song took about 3 or 4 months to finally be done. And by the time it was done, he used over 100 musicians on that project. meaning the orchestra. So when you talk about an orchestra, you got 32 pieces off the bat right there, 64 depending on how deep the orchestra goes. And then you may have a drummer come in, but that drummer's groove wasn't right. And you will cycle drummers until you get the right drummer for the song. Because in live music, just because somebody is the most recorded artist of all time, or they do this session, that it doesn't mean that they'll fit with this song. Every song has its own energy and feel. So the producers had to get the right mix of musicians to get the song right. You may go through 4 or 5 different, sometimes 10 different bass players before you get the right groove and the right feel. You have percussions, you have all of these different pieces that go into making a song that's 4 minutes long. And that's expensive because when you're bringing in these orchestras, you're paying them union rate. And back then, if you had to cycle, so that gets very expensive after a while. You can't just have one band playing every song. Well, you can, but that's not how it's done most of the time. Even when you're dealing with bands, Earth, Wind & Fire, when you go back and listen to their music, they had their bands that they toured with. But when you go back to the studio, the Phoenix horn section of Earth, Wind & Fire, they weren't necessarily Lee Stradifield, Romley Davis, whom I had the pleasure of playing the drums for when I was a teenager. He was a horn player for Earth, Wind & Fire. A lot of times, those weren't the ones in the studio. There were studio musicians playing that stuff, and the band that you saw out front wasn't necessarily the band that you heard in the studio. Like Earth, Wind & Fire's Spirit album, that was most of the original band, Al McKay and those guys. But when you get to All in All, Maurice White used outside musicians on that album. It's very expensive to produce R&B the right way. When you go back and listen to that Marvin Gaye from the 70s and you listen to Leon Ware's production on the I Want You album, go back and listen to that I Want You album by Marvin Gaye and the space that it breathes and the amount of musicians. Go back to Isaac Hayes on Stax Records when you go back to that Hot Buttered Soul album and those grand long intros that Isaac Hayes used to do. Isaac Hayes had the original Walk On By was like an 11-minute song, and the first 3 minutes was just flat out orchestration. These were maestros. You're dealing with music that's more complicated and more sophisticated than Beethoven and Bach when you listen to the orchestration. So that's very expensive. So what the labels did as the 80s came along in the 90s, they removed that out of black music. They still allowed the whites to have this sound. But us, we don't have the budget for it. So when you get to the late 80s, you have a popping up of more independent black labels, Def Jam. You get the New Jack Swing sound from Teddy Riley. You got the LaFace sound. We bring in the live music back. And as you get through the early 90s and mid 90s, you see the same play get made again. A lot of your majors came through and swept up a lot of your smaller black independent labels and let go and released a lot of the great musicians, producers, and arrangers. Or they would tell that producer and arranger that was really good, hey, we'll pay you a ton of money to go produce this white act over there, but you can't produce no more niggas. In order for R&B to work, there has to be a synergy between top-level singers and top-level producers. If y'all notice, I haven't spent much time dealing with the actual singer, the person that you're familiar with. Most people are familiar with the name Lionel Richie, Teddy Pendergrass. They're familiar with the names. They're not familiar with the artist and the production that went on behind making that name great. Rick James. Rick James was a hell of a producer. He took what Parliament Funkadelic did and evolved that sound into his punk funk sound of the early 80s. But when you're dealing with singers like a Whitney Houston, for example, her music, someone like her, a Gladys Knight, a Shaka Khan, the quality of their music depends on the level of the production. These women aren't going into the studio writing the arrangements out. No different with Teddy Pendergrass. Teddy Pendergrass wasn't writing the music. He relied on Gamble and Huff to do that. But when you get into the 80s, Gamble and Huff is now working with these white artists. Leon Ware is now working with these white artists. They're not producing these grand arrangements for black artists anymore. And in the late 70s, a lot of your great artists got released from their contract. And without the teaming of great production and great arrangers, their music does not translate the same. That's what happened. When you get from the late 70s to the early 80s, you have Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards of Chic. The Chic singers didn't get re-signed by the labels. But the Chic sound still lived and existed. It lived and existed through who? I'm glad you asked. Through Madonna. That song, Like a Virgin, that's Chic. But since the Chic singers were no longer around, here's this new little white girl on the scene. Let's give that nigga soul music to these white folks. And that's why if you go back and look, white music was at its absolute best in the 80s. Because in the 80s, when you look at Phil Collins basically had Earth, Wind & Fire. When Earth, Wind & Fire broke up, Phil Collins signed Charles Stepney. Charles Stepney was dead by then. I'm sorry. Rest in peace, Charles Stepney. I mean, Phil Collins signed, I'm drawing a blank to his name. God damn it. Dwan, I got to start writing notes on these shows. I'll be off the top of my head with this shit. What's his name? Keyboard player, Earth, Wind & Fire. Well, all of Earth, Wind & Fire. Phil Collins had Philip Bailey, Verdine White, bass player, the Phoenix horn section, Larry Dunn. Larry Dunn was Earth, Wind & Fire's music director. Now he's working with Phil Collins. So when you listen to that 80s Phil Collins, what you're getting is Earth, Wind & Fire without Maurice White. That's why the shit sounded so good. They split the singer from the production team, which was a major blow in the death of in the decline of R&B. Major blow. You look at someone like a Whitney Houston. She was under the direction of Clive Davis. When I was watching Whitney Houston's documentary, there was a part that stood out to me that really annoyed me, but it's true. Clive Davis said when he put Whitney Houston on, he told the production teams to stay away from funk. Why again? Why does funk keep coming up? Funk was too black. Clive Davis told the producers, I don't want Whitney singing none of that George Clinton funk crap. That Whitney Houston, do you know that Whitney Houston wasn't able to sing what she wanted? The first song that Whitney Houston sang that was of her choice, that was something that she wanted, was I'm Your Baby Tonight in 1990. That was her third album. That was the first time she was able to sing something that she wanted. Everything else was the industry trying to make Whitney Houston this whitewashed version of what they wanted. Now, Whitney was so dope, she still pulled it off. But can you imagine if Whitney Houston came up 10 years sooner in the 70s with that voice and that delivery? If she was able to team with a Leon Ware or Gamble and Huff in the 70s, if she's able to team with James Carmichael in the 70s without the record industry fucking with her, can you imagine what we would have gotten out of Whitney Houston? The Whitney Houston that we got was Clive Davis's interpretation of how a black person should sound, not authentically how that woman sounded. Nigga Jaren said, imagine Whitney singing Bob Gun. That would be funny. I'm not debating with anyone in the chat room. You sit back and listen. I ain't debating with you niggas that are contrarian. Somebody said Whitney didn't have soul. Man, if you don't sit your monkey ass down. Whitney had everything Whitney needed. You did not hear Whitney soul because Whitney was not allowed to sing soul when she was at the prime of her voice. Whitney Houston grew up on fucking Shaka Khan. You talking about the queen of funk. The hell you mean Whitney didn't have no soul? You don't sit your monkey ass down. Please. Whitney had every element a singer needed. She just wasn't allowed to do her thing. Niggas always want to be in the chat room thinking they know what the hell they... What did John Henry Clark say? I only debate my equals, everyone else I teach. Sit your ass down and listen. Don't debate with me, learn something, and then go look up what I say, and I promise you I'm right, nigga. I ain't saying shit you can't find out there. I'm not creating the news. I'm just speaking on what's already out there, using my ability to synthesize what's out there in a succinct manner for people to use and learn on their own. Niggas don't know what the fuck they talking about trying to argue with me. Back to what I was talking about. We're talking about the decline of R&B. We are talking about the decline of R&B.
You're listening to Incense and Ashtrays with Dwan B. Music for your soul.
You here on my channel, I'm not on yours. You dig what I'm saying? So, talking about the decline of R&B. See, in the 80s is when Michael Jackson was so great that whole pop genre became a major thing. Crossover pop. And they started trying to fit all black singers in that box, purposely removing them from soul. From the soul of our music. And again, people, this was all intentional. And unfortunately, since Clive Davis was one of the main tools behind the soul being taken out of our music, his proteges bared the brunt of it. His signings, the people that he managed, primarily Whitney Houston. So these things black folks were intentional. What I'm trying to get you to understand is this. We as a people never asked for this. We as a people never stopped listening to soul music. We as a people never said we don't want good R&B. As long as it was being pumped out at a high quality level, we purchased it at a high clip. This was the music industry's decision. This was the music industry's decision. Not ours. Not ours. And anyone that's trying to draw the distinction between soul and pop is a motherfucking fool. Because all soul and all pop is black music that white people like. That's all it is. The Thriller album by Michael Jackson was funk, funk, funk all day and all night. You had Louis Johnson on bass from the Brothers Johnson, George Duke on the keys on a lot of those albums, Greg Phillinganes, that's funk right there, goddammit. Joe Sample, Tom Washington, the arranger who arranged a lot of those Earth and Fire horn parts, also arranged the horn parts on Thriller and Off the Wall. You're dealing with soul music that white people just happen to like. Let's get that straight. We ain't gonna sit here and act like pop is some new genre that came from the heavens and that's the sound that the world just took and everybody wants to buy. No. Pop music is just black music that white people like. That's all. That's all it is. Sometimes the pop came from a disco sound. Sometimes the pop came from a funk bass. Sometimes the pop came from a soul bass. Pop is always rooted in the family of rhythm and blues. And as you see on my tree here, where's my music family tree? Here we go. As you see on my family tree here, it's all twins of rock and roll R&B. Funk went this way, soul stayed down the middle, and disco went over here. But when you're dealing with these genres of music, you got the same musicians playing them all. Chic was known as one of the greatest disco bands ever, but they was also funky as hell. Rufus and Shaka Khan was a funky ass funk band, but they're also great at disco and soul. P-Funk was one of the greatest funk bands of all time, but they were also heavy metal. Michael Jackson was pop, but he also sang the Delta Blues. You knocked me off of my feet now, baby. Whoo! What do you think that song was? That was the blues, goddammit. The blues played through the most popular artist at the time, Michael Jackson, so it got categorized as crossover pop. But The Way You Make Me Feel by Michael Jackson was the Delta Blues, nigga. Look, you gotta get these European rigid ideologies out your mind, black people. That's not how we listen to music. Black people listen to music through feel and groove. And sometimes that groove is expressed through the blues. Sometimes it's expressed through EDM. Sometimes it's expressed through West Coast hip hop. Other times it's expressed through heavy metal. Sometimes it's expressed through cool jazz. Sometimes it's expressed through hyphy. It's all the same shit. Music is emotions. Just like you're a person. Sometimes you're mad. Sometimes you're happy. Sometimes you're sad. Sometimes you're elated. And you can go up and down through these emotions, shit, in a 30-minute block. You can go from mad to happy to sad to frustrated to content. You can do all that shit in 30 minutes. Well, what do you think is the difference when it comes to music? Sometimes you feel good and you want to party, and you in that party feel. So Dr. Dre expressed his early music as a youngster through techno. The early days of West Coast hip hop was actually techno. We get house music out of Chicago and Detroit. House music out of Chicago and Detroit was expressed as techno in Los Angeles when Dr. Dre was with the Worldwide Wrecking Crew. And then when he got through to NWA, he got funkified and expressed West Coast hip hop through the funk, which became West Coast hip hop. So all this shit, these little rigid classifications and categories, get them out your mind. You think like a European. And I'm not blaming you for that. It's a condition of the society that we're in. I'm here to blow that paradigm out. That paradigm needs to be destroyed. Egyptian Lover. Thank you, Tasha. I met Egyptian Lover last year. He's Arabian Prince. I met him. But Egyptian Lover, another one, techno. So when it comes down to it, chat room, I don't give a fuck if you from Detroit, nigga. Can you call 10 people that actually worked at Motown while they were in Detroit? I can. So while you in the chat room talking about you from Detroit, no, nigga, I'm from LA. But I can call 10 people right now that recorded music from Motown. I know what I'm talking about. You sit your consumer ass down and listen. As a matter of fact, chat room, time that nigga out. That nigga talking too much in the chat room. Time him out. And if he come back in the chat room again, don't block him because they be in here, but time that nigga out. There's people in the chat room that got way too much to say and ain't got a damn thing behind what they say. This time that nigga out. I'm tired of looking at him in the chat room. You can listen, but you can't talk, homie. Back to what we talking about. Back to what we talking about. See, music, how it's expressed depends on the feeling that you have. And music is also expressed through your current environment, through the environment that you're in. When you listen to salsa music, people attribute to to Cuba, when actually salsa music was Cubans who migrated to New York listening to bebop. Their version of bebop, which comes out of Kansas City with Bird and Dizzy, to New York. The Latin people that were in New York at the time from Cuba and Puerto Rico, primarily Cuba, heard the bebop sound and interpreted their way, which is how you get salsa. Because people from the islands hear and feel music from an island perspective. Every form of current island music, whether you're talking about reggaeton, Latin pop, world beat, dancehall, Brazilian, all that stuff is born out of the Black American sound. That's according to what they say. Yeah, salsa and tango is the United States. And the people that heard us doing our thing took that sound back to their native lands. Calypso is another story. Calypso is indigenous to the Caribbean. It's Caribbean drums. See, in Americans didn't fuck with them steel drums. When you hear that steel drum, you're dealing with music that was created in the islands from people who were transferred as slaves from either Africa, and don't get me wrong, and instead of the whole truth, A lot of slaves were transferred to the islands from America. But the calypso sound is an island sound. But when you hear a drum set get involved, if you see someone sitting down on a drum set, or they're programming their drums on their computer like a drum set, that is the key indication that you're dealing with a sound that's native to North America. When you're dealing with a drum set, you're dealing with a child of Black North American music. But again, this whole tree, I'm going to do a whole nother show. I'm going to do a whole series breaking down my music family tree. No, calypso did not influence jazz. Black people, think about this. Jazz was created in the 1900s. There were no fucking radio stations from the islands playing calypso music in New Orleans, in Kansas City in the 1920s for calypso to even influence jazz. The United States wasn't bringing in calypso bands from Trinidad to Kansas City. No. Don't ever go for that bullshit. So music is a reflection of the environment that it's in. Back to what we're talking about as far as the decline of R&B. You're right, Eastwood. My sample pack, look, I would have my sample packs ready for y'all. It's just my engineer is taking way longer than I was supposed to get them. I was supposed to have these packs back in November. But I'm not tripping because my engineer is really hella dope. He sent me some samples of what he's doing with my music, and it sounds really nice. I had a whole bunch of studio sessions last year that the original engineer didn't do right. So I had to get my sounds re-engineered. So when I get those sounds re-engineered, I will have them out for you. But back to what we're talking about, the decline of R&B. The decline of R&B. So by the time we get through the 90s and into the early 2000s, R&B for the most part is done. Thank God for the neo-soul sector of R&B. But again, the neo-soul sector, when you're talking about Erykah Badu, she was on Motown. At the time, Motown was no longer a major player in music, and it was going to allow anything to be released that was going to lend to its credibility. You had Jill Scott. She was on Hidden Beach. You had Bilal. He was on Aftermath. Dr. Dre was getting back into the real music side of the game. He was using his heavy hip hop to finance and release some really dope R&B and produce some really good R&B. He reproduced The Heat by Tony Braxton. You know, he executive produced Bilal's Firstborn, I forgot the name of that album, but y'all know what I'm talking about. Born of a Second Child. So when you're talking about that era, you're talking about, you know, Eric Roberson and these guys. These all would have been major players in the 70s, except for the fact that major labels did not want them. They wanted people that they could control. Yeah, Anthony Hamilton was another one. Firstborn Second, yeah, that's it. That was the name of the Bilal album. But that was a alternative movement. That was people like me and you and we who still had a longing and yearning for real R&B saying, fuck the radio, we're going to buy this right here. And eventually those labels got gulped up, or those artists got signed by major labels. And the industry basically took the money that it had in R&B and dumped it all into hip hop. This is how people like Usher and Chris Brown and Drake and Trey Songz became relevant. Beyonce, Rihanna. Now, I'm not taking away from Beyonce. Beyonce's good. But Beyonce benefits from a record industry that basically the only money the record industry had allocated to R&B all went to either Beyonce or Alicia Keys. And every other female had to get it how they get it. That's why we as soul people, we as black people, we should never look towards the charts or Grammys as the barometer to the success of a music project. The charts and Grammys is what white people created to measure music because they don't understand that shit. We measure music by how it makes us feel, our soul. But Beyonce benefited from a record. Beyonce and Jay-Z both. Mind you, when we dealing with 2004, 2005, this is before Beyonce and Jay-Z got married. How did both Beyonce and Jay-Z benefit from this? Because like I said, Beyonce was one of the only artists that got mainstream push on the R&B side of the game. And mind you, most people who listen to music, they're not really into music. They're just going to listen to whatever is getting played. And if a song is getting played 15 times a day, at some point, no matter how much you hated it when it first came out, if you keep that radio on, at some point, that music is going to get inside of you and you're going to start bobbing your head to it and you're going to start feeling it. So, Jay-Z and hip hop benefited from this change in music because when you're dealing with that time in music, the music industry literally took all of its funding out of R&B. And basically the songs that became hits in R&B, whether you're talking about Run It from Chris Brown or a lot of that Usher stuff, that trapping B is what I call it. I call it, as a matter of fact, I came up with a new genre, and nigga, you niggas better not take it because it's already on here, and I put it on my tree. What I call here, you started getting what I call hip hop and B. So you had the adult contemporary sound of the 80s, that's Luther Vandross, Freddie Jackson, Melba Moore, into New Jack Swing, Teddy Riley, into neo soul, that went into modern contemporary R&B, which was more Tony Braxton and that sound, Gerald Levert, which evolved into what I call, this is my term that I created, hip hop and B, where it's basically hip hop music with an R&B singer singing an auto tune over top. Welcome Chris Brown. Welcome Rihanna. It's basically hip hop that they're putting with the R&B sound. Mama Zeke, yes, I am making this into a shirt, but not this one. It's getting refined. Like this particular tree is getting refined by a graphic editor of mine. And once the graphic editor is done putting everything in and making it look right, yes, this shirt will become a tree. I mean, this tree will become a shirt. Dyslexia again. God damn it, Dwan. This tree is going to be on shirts. I'm also going to make it a poster. And I'm also going to make it an art canvas. So you can have this in your home and explain it to your children. The greatness of foundational Black American music and where it comes from. Yes, Ja Rule definitely falls under that genre. Ja Rule was one of the people that helped kill off both R&B and rap. Yes, Ja Rule fits under that. What would I do without my baby? The thought alone made me dumb and crazy. Oh, shit. Radio play music ain't been shit this whole century. From that 2000s fuckboy era of hip-hop, which I call hip-pop. That's what you see me right here. I have here mainstream hip-hop. But I won't credit myself for hip-hop. I got that term from Black Dot. I heard Black Dot say that term one time on his show Urban X. Shouts out to that show Urban X. I once heard Black Dot use the term hip-hop. So I will not take credit for what I did not create. Salute to Black Dot and the Urban Excellence YouTube platform. He's where I got the term hip-hop from. That's basically Drake and this nonsense that we hear right now on the radio. But my term, which is different than mainstream hip-hop, is hip-hop and B. This whole plastic sound where every song is the same tempo, no key changes, no orchestration, is basically trap music with someone singing auto-tune on top. So you see here how R&B declined over the years. When you're back in this era of the funk, soul, disco era, you have live orchestrations, you have arrangers, producers, a lush sound, symphony orchestras, horns, rhythm sections, background singers, everything. Compare that to what you listen to when you listen to Usher or Chris Brown. And I'm not casting aspersions on these guys. These niggas still got talent. They still stars. Usher still is a star. Chris Brown is still a star. To be a star requires a certain energy, a certain arrogance in a way, a certain feel. And they have it. So I'm not talking about them as people. I'm not talking about Drake as a person. I don't know any of these niggas. And I wish nothing but love to all of these people that I'm talking about. But I'm a music critic. I gotta tell it for what it is. I have no issues with any of these people. They are conditions of the music industry. Let me say that again. They are conditions of the music industry. Somebody said Usher made great music. Where? Great? I beg to differ. Usher made cool music for people who wanted to hear some R&B at a time there was no quality R&B anywhere to be found. Usher made a few hits. But shit, I think Music Soul Child made way better music than Usher. So did Anthony Hamilton and Raheem DeVaughn. But Usher is who the record industry pushed, and so hey. I always call that album Confessions. And if I know I'm about to step on some toes with this statement. Don't take personal offense, but it's how I feel. I always say Confessions is a deep album for simple people. These are my confessions. When I said all I can say is, get that nursery rhyme out of here. Banana, banana, but me, my momana, banana. Then what does Usher say? Confessions, when I say all I can say, banana, banana, banana. Do you not hear the nursery rhyme? Do you not hear that nursery rhyme that he just, yeah, you like the song because if it's a nursery rhyme you've been hearing your whole life. So of course you're gonna like it. We all love playing that game on road trips back in the day before you had cell phones to distract you from that long ass drive from LA to Vegas. You take a nursery rhyme and you turned it into an R&B hit. That's all it took in the 2000s. That is a reflection of how bad the music was. All you had to do was take a nursery rhyme and have Usher sing it and say, this is this confession, and then you got a hit. Okay. Sounds good. But can you put that next to close the door? Come on now. You can't put Confessions next to the polyrhythmic sounds of Harold Melvin in the Blue Notes, Al Green, Marvin Gaye, Smokey Robinson, Stevie Wonder. Nigga, what? Jaheim was great. Jaheim was someone who preserved the soulful sound. But even Jaheim is, I always say, I wish one day, hopefully I can do this one day. I want to go back to the music of the 2000s and reproduce those songs with live orchestration. I think a singer like Jaheim, singers like him were Johnny Gill, Gerald Levert, even Tyrese, for all the chicanery and fuck shit he be doing. I think that their music, Blue Cantrell, their music was a condition of the industry of the time. Had their music, Anthony Hamilton, gotten the orchestration and the production and the tender love and care of music released in the 70s, we'd have a whole different sound. I'll take them, because those are some great, Jermaine Dupri, great production. Those are some great productions on a computer. They did the best they can do on those with those programmed sounds. But what if we could reproduce those same songs just with live orchestrations, with background singers, with horn sections, with string sections, with a live rhythm section? We'd have totally different music. Carl Thomas is another one. Yeah. See, Bad Boy ran Carl Thomas into the ground. Carl Thomas should still be relevant today. He should. That album he released was great. But Bad Boy did not know how to produce R&B. They were a hip-hop label. They weren't an R&B label. So Carl Thomas's career got ran into the dirt. When, if you ask me, Carl Thomas could have been someone that we still hear about and talk about today had his music been produced and done right. See, the thing that draws you into the music, we see the singers, but the singer, we think it's the singer. It's not the singer. Well, it's somewhat the singer, but it's more of the production behind the singer. Go back and listen to, let me give you an example. Luther Vandross. Listen to Luther Vandross when Marcus Miller was his producer and Paul Reiser arranged his music, that early 80s Luther Vandross, mid 80s Luther Vandross, and compare that to 90s and 2000s Dance with My Father Luther Vandross. You still got the same Luther on Dance with My Father. But the level of production between Dance with My Father and Didn't You Know That is night and day. Make Me a Believer, those songs, same singer, different results. That's because when you're dealing with a Paul Reiser orchestration with Marcus Miller production and Luther Vandross's voice, you have a team, and that team is arranged a sound that vibrates and communicates with your soul. Again, your heart beats like a drum. When someone makes you feel good, they pull your heartstrings like a violin. When you're angry, you get loud and you sound the horn. Life is a song. The music is the wind, the air. The drums are the earth. The horns are the fire. You see how the elements of earth, the elements of universe, tie into the lingo of music and emotions? All of this comes together, and it's the root of soul music. So when you take that soul out of the music, you take away the music, and now you just have a song. So we had a lot of great artists in the early 2000s and in the 90s. Jaguar Wright. That sister was dope. Can you imagine if Jaguar Wright got with Gambling Huff? Let's tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Our music, we were separated from our music. Our music was taken from us. It was defunded. And that money was put into hip hop, and what is now basically degenerate music. Yeah, Jesse Powell, Adina Howard. But real music isn't dead. It's not. What they play on the radio may be, but here are some names from current artists who orchestrate and do music right. Look up Jarris Mosey. I have an interview I did with him that's over on Mixcloud. It's also somewhere here on this channel down there. He arranged and orchestrated hits with Anthony Hamilton, Jill Scott, Jasmine Sullivan. Look him up. Look up Corey Henry. I just went to see Corey Henry live a couple months ago. He's going to be back in LA next month, and I'm going to be there to see him then too. That boy played that organ like a motherfucker. Corey Henry out of New York. Anderson .Paak. Robert Glasper. Robert Glasper is getting ready to release Black Radio 3. Black Radio 1 and 2 were two of my favorite albums of the 20 teens. And Robert Glasper's other album, Art Science. Real music is still here. Terrace Martin. Oh, I love Tamia. Tamia is great. It's still great music out there being produced. You just got to find it. And I help you find that on my show, Incense and Ashtrays, over on Mixcloud. over on Mixcloud. And for those of you who join my Patreon, we're going to go even deeper, because I'm going to do similar shows like this over on Patreon, but with the music playing. So I'll be able to, my Patreon subscribers will be able to get an even more in-depth knowledge of what we're doing right here on the music side of the game. And that'll be on my lower tier. I'll do the music live on Mixcloud. And if you catch it live on Mixcloud, you got it. But the archives will be over on Patreon. Yeah, hit the like button, share, and subscribe. Let them know we're talking about how R&B, the decline of R&B, was not a natural thing. It was something done by the industry through every time black labels were created and successful, those labels being bought out or merging with bigger white labels, big bank take little bank, and the artists under those independent black labels that were creating the music that we all love being thrown out onto the street. That's something that happened. It's not something that we created. It's something that we've been victims of. Mint condition, thrown out on the streets because they didn't fit what the music industry wanted. Frank McComb was another one, thrown out on the streets. Frank McComb used to be part of Prince's jam session band. Frank McComb would be the music director for all of Prince's world famously known house jam sessions. He was good enough to be one of Prince's primary musicians, but not good enough for the record industry to promote and produce. And if you go back and listen to my interview with Jarris Mosey, J-Mo was one of Prince's last proteges. And J-Mo talks about those house parties and those times learning from Prince. Go back and listen to that interview I did with Jarris Mosey. He breaks all this stuff down. So we got to know that the current state of music is not a place that we took it. This current infiltration of non-black American artists, and no disrespect to the non-black American artists, because one thing about us, our music is for everyone can play our music. Go ahead and play it. The difference is back in the day, we used to get credit for it. And our music would still be what got pushed because it was the best music. Now the record industry is purposely pushing artists who aren't black American because the record industry know that they don't have the soul. And it helps contribute to the dumbing down of our sound. That's why your Drakes, your Rihannas, your Nicki Minaj's, your Cardi B's, these are the people pushed. And again, it's no disrespect of them or where they come from. But let's break it all down and tell the truth. Outside of a few exceptions here and there, the music, if it's going to be played the way we play it, it has to come from the soil of those who grew up within the culture, born into the culture by blood. Because our music has been passed down to us through the blood, as you see on my music family tree, for more than 400 years. When you get someone outside that bloodline to play the music, it's naturally going to have a different texture, a different feel, a different groove. And by different, I'm not saying it's worse, because there's been plenty of great non-foundational black American artists. First that comes to mind is Loose Ends. Loose Ends, they come from the UK. One of the greatest R&B acts to ever do it. Rod Temperton, a white man from the UK, one of the greatest soul writers of all time. Always and Forever, I Want to Rock With You. Don Bell, Philadelphia International, born in Jamaica, but moved to America as a 2-year-old, raised in the American culture, did it right. But Tom Bell wasn't running around trying to say his music was Jamaican. He grew up on the streets of Philadelphia. And all of his music is rhythm and blues, soul music interpreted through the sounds of Philadelphia. So I'm not casting aspersions on people who aren't from here. But what I am saying is the record industry knows what the fuck it's doing. They know what they're doing by flooding our music with people who aren't native to our sound. That's why we must have these conversations. That's why we must talk about the roots of our music and connecting our music, connecting hip hop with the blues, R&B with the blues, and jazz. Because if we don't show the long roots of hip hop going down through Jim Crow, through slavery, then we allow other groups to pick off the tree that we created and act as if they're the ones who created it. This is just the first in a series I'm doing on the destruction of R&B and the roots of our music. So tell all your friends about this platform. Let everyone you know about Incense and Ashtrays. Share the program. And we about to get this story straightened out and settled once and for all. If you dig what I'm saying. Someone in the chat room said it seems like rock music gets more respect than R&B. Look, R&B won't get the respect it deserves until we give it that respect. Of course, I expect them others to promote their versions of what we do over what we do. I totally expect that. Of course they're going to do that. That's old school. The world has always promoted their versions of our shit. It's time for us now as a people to step up and claim our shit loud and proud, without equivocation, without apology. We need to listen. Don't just listen to a song because the radio say it's popular. Take some time to scan it around and find what you like. One issue we have as a people, we tend to accept whatever they give us. No more of that. Stop accepting every little thing they give us. We got to take control of our narrative, of what we listen to and what you pass down to your children for them to listen to. Yeah, that's right, Liberty. Take time to learn guitar and all the instruments. J-Mo, Jairus Mosey, he has a page on his Instagram called Industry Lessons. He teaches you how to play the guitar online. You can learn how to play the guitar from a Grammy-winning music producer online. I encourage anyone who wants to learn the guitar to hit up Jarris Mosey and hit up Industry Lessons on Instagram. Or I think it's industrylessons.com. Learn how to play the guitar. Learn how to play the drums, the violin, the bass. Learn how to sing again. Too many of our brothers is trying to rap. And so now we got the sisters that want to be hardcore rappers. Fuck a hardcore rap. The reason why people hardcore rapped is because they couldn't sing. Rap is an expression of soul music for the person that don't have the pipes of Luther Vandross. But you got cats that can sing damn near as good as Freddie Jackson trying to rap. No, nigga, sing. We are the most diverse music people on the planet. The Black American in North America is no equivocation and no apologies, the most diverse music producer and consumer on the planet. Period. Point blank. End of story. But we've allowed the media to make it seem as if black people only listen to rap and hip hop. If that's the only thing we do, and rock isn't for you niggas, that's white music. Jimi Hendrix says otherwise. Oh, jazz isn't for you black folks, that's now sophisticated white people music. Count Basie says otherwise. I remember I had at Craig Facts, we did a show about last summer, and there was a particular artist in the room. I'm not gonna mention the artist's name, but we did a lot of interviewing artists last year. Well, really in 2020, but in early 2021, we interviewed a bunch of artists. But there was just one artist in particular. Before the show, we were talking about the difference between jazz and hip hop. And that artist says, see, the difference is jazz has more of a refined thing. And, that's what, black folks that have a little bit of money listen to. Hip hop is from the streets. I almost picked that chair up and threw it onto the goddamn street. I was like, huh? The fuck is you talking about? Ain't no music more hood and street than jazz, nigga. Jazz and the blues, but really jazz, because the blues was really taking off in the Delta and the South, still rural. Jazz got to the cities before blues did. Kansas City, New York in particular, New Orleans, Kansas City, and New York City to be in particular. Man, do you know when Jelly Roll Morton was coming up as a jazz pianist? Jelly Roll Morton started playing jazz piano as an 8-year-old in whorehouses. And what he would do is, at his piano, there was a peephole that he would look into the room to where them tricks, where the harlots and the hookers was turning their tricks with them tricks. And he would look at the rhythm of the motion and play his piano to the rhythm of the stroke, if you dig what I'm saying. Jelly Roll Morton's one of the forefathers of jazz. Louis Armstrong was poor on the streets of New Orleans. He had to play his trumpet for change. If he didn't get change in that trumpet case, he did not eat. See, when hip-hop came up, hip-hop at least had Section 8. Hip-hop at least had WIC vouchers and food stamps. You may be poor and broke, but you gonna eat. Nigga, when jazz came up, nigga, if you couldn't play that saxophone, if you couldn't play that horn, you literally did not eat. In New York, they used to throw rent parties. Black people did not have Section 8. So if you had a tough time if you got laid off from your job, or you didn't get paid the way or you had something unexpected expense, you threw what was called a rent party. And at rent parties, people paid sometimes by the size of their waist. However many inches your waist was how much you paid to get in the party. Or sometimes it will be 50 cents or a quarter or whatever, depending. But oftentimes, the price to get in the rent party in New York was through the size of your waist. And that's how black people paid the rent. Talk about some hood, nigga, please. Hip hop is not a third as poor and broke as jazz and the blues was. We got to know this, people. We got to know our history. And that's why I'm here to help teach it. Yeah, you're right, Simo. Jazz is improvisation, just like freestyle is a rap. The freestyle, everything in the rap. Again, I'm already writing this book. The book has already gotten started being written. I don't know when it'll be done, but I'm writing it. All of those elements you see in hip hop, they're in rap. They're in jazz. Battle culture, that's jazz. The battle at the Savoy in the 1930s with Chick Webb. If you thought you was the baddest band in the land, you had to go battle Chick Webb to get that title. They had battle dancing, battle singing. That's the original verses. Having a dance to go along with the song. That didn't start with hip hop. B-boying was just the dance that was popular in 1974. That the day that Cool Herc had his little party. When was the last time you been to a hip hop show and saw somebody b-boy? I'll wait. Like these other groups try to come in and make it seem like, no, hip hop is b-boying. It's the sound system. Well, question. If I have a sound system with no music, is that sound system still hip hop? Or is it just a sound system? What if I play rock music through that sound system? Is it still hip hop? What if I play heavy metal? Or what if I play a goddamn Martin Luther King speech through that major sound system? Is it still hip hop? No, the speaker system is just a tool. It's a conduit. We can't let these other people, just because they innovated some conduit, lay claim to the sound. A speaker system is whatever sound is playing through that speaker system at the time. That's what a speaker system amounts to. So when a Jamaican comes around to you talking about a speaker system, remind them, a speaker system is only as good as the music that's being played through it. And the music Kool Herc played through his speaker system was foundational Black American funk, which is the father of hip hop music. I've seen Jay-Z, I've seen Common, I've seen Snoop, I've seen Ice Cube, I've seen Kendrick Lamar, I've seen DJ Quick, I've seen about 20, 30 other rap artists. And I ain't seen not one nigga b-boy on stage yet. So is b-boying a necessary component to hip-hop? Or was b-boying just the dance of the time that the genre of hip-hop was introduced? If you remove b-boying, is it still hip-hop? I'm doing this for a reason. This is the level of deductive reasoning you must do when people present these analogies and try to lay claim to our music. All black music has a dance. Swing had its own dance. Bebop had its own dance that was different than swing. Every form of Black American music has its own attire. The attire of West Coast hip hop was different than the attire of East Coast hip hop. The attire of disco was different than the attire of soul music. Bebop had his own attire. When you look at that skinny suit that Malcolm X wore, like the made with the little skinny tie, that what we call the civil rights suit, when you saw them brothers with the skinny lapel and the skinny tie and the rounded glasses, that's the attire of bebop. See, when bebop came into music, the beboppers were young, brash, and different than the establishment swingers of the big band era. So they expressed that in the way they dressed, in their artwork, in their dance. All Black American music comes with those elements that people act as if is unique to just hip hop. All forms of our music have a dance, have an artwork, have a soundtrack, and have a certain attire. And if we want to go deeper, all of our music has its own haircut. And depending on where you live in the country, its own car culture. Lowrider music, some shit that Mexicans are trying to claim right now. Here in LA, you got Mexicans trying to claim more lowrider music and oldies. That's black music. But lowrider music is popular in Los Angeles because we have a lowrider culture. Lowrider culture could not exist in New York because cars are inconvenient in New York and they have a great public transit system. So when we want to talk about a sound system outside somewhere at a park, that's unique to New York because in New York you can do that. You bring that same sound system to LA and try to plug it up, the LAPD gonna have 10, 15 police cars and a helicopter over your ass and be spraying the whole goddamn park down with mace within 6 minutes if you try to bring a sound system to the park in LA. But when you remove the sound system, do you still have hip hop? Of course. So you can't let these little distinctions and these segregations and these all little snippets that others try to bring into our music live and thrive. No. Real talk, Mama Zeke. She said Mama Zeke is Jamaican. Where's the equivalent? Where is the rap equivalent in Jamaica? That's all you gotta ask. I didn't talk much about this kind of stuff because honestly, I thought this science was settled. I really did. I thought the science was settled. I thought everyone just knew that where the music came from and they would have love and appreciation for it. Because the forefathers of Jamaican music have love and appreciation and they respect it. The forefathers of dancehall, Afrobeat, Eurobeat, and all of these different forms of music give respect to what we created. But over this last year and a half, we've had people come in and trying to lay claim. So no, you know what? Y'all woke up a beast here. I figured my whole life, I've been studying music since the mid-90s. I figured since I've been studying music, I figured that'd just be some shit that I talk about in casual conversation. I didn't think it'd ever be something that I'd be doing out here in public. I never studied music to write books and do all these things in public that you see me doing now. I studied music because I just wanted to be a better drummer. That's all. That was my intent. Anything that I do, I just want to be good at it. And the best way to be good at something is to study the history of it, study where it comes from, and find your place within it. That was always my purpose for studying music, just to be a better drummer, a better musician, a better producer. But since I see other people trying to claim our shit, you motherfuckers done woke up the wrong one. You woke up the wrong one. But I want to thank y'all for listening to part 1 of the Decline of R&B. We're going to check back in and talk more about this as time goes on. The music family tree. Download Mixcloud and subscribe to Incense and Ashtrays, Dwan B. You can find me over on Mixcloud under either Incense and Ashtrays or Dwan B. Type either one in, you will find me on Mixcloud. Or you could just go to the bio. Go to the description box in the same video and click on the link to Mixcloud. Either way, it's your choice. I want you guys to remember this. There are no perfect messengers, only perfect messages for those who are willing to pick up the game. Get ready for my music family tree that's coming out pretty soon when it's all the way tightened up and done right. And we're going to spread that family tree like wildfire. All right? I want to thank y'all for listening. Get your merchandise at hotepish.com/shop. And have a good day. I'm out.